What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the 10th episode of The Thinking Market. This episode, I kind of want to reflect on specifically the last episode. There was a mixed bag of comments, both from the left and the right, primarily of people trying to psychoanalyze me within 20 seconds of watching that podcast episode. They somehow already knew so much about me, which I was very impressed by. But I think that says more about them than it does of me. And I kind of wanted to dive into discussing a little bit of personalities, and power, and its relation to economics, if we can make that connection. So my question is, what is the significance of personalities? In our world, obviously, we have different personalities, and I think people reflect what they admire in people, maybe mostly through social media and the content of the people they admire is who they consume. So I think personalities in a way is part of this medium or this role of conveying ideas. We're not here just to think alone in a vacuum. We're here to kind of, I guess, internalize and externalize these ideas. And I guess personalities are, in a way, how we externalize the ideas. What is our tone when we're speaking, as Ron Paul would ask. My friend Ferre would say, the Ben Shapiro quote, facts don't care about your feelings. He would say, well, feelings don't care about your facts. And I think there's so much truth to that idea that, yeah, a lot of times people will project what they think you believe and what your ideas are based on how they interpret your personality. So then, in a sense, and what it seems like on social media is that your personality can almost be more significant than the ideas you carry, which may be unfortunate or just a reflection of, you know, some aspects of this society. Because I do like the Mises idea that he would say, he would judge someone based on their intelligence, which I think is fascinating. Um, and I think that that holds a lot of weight to it because as all actions are based on ideas, what someone's ideas are in a way will like determine their actions. So if, you knew in some omniscient form what someone's ideas were, then you can kind of tell a lot about them. And I guess this is like going beyond ideas is like influence, and perhaps that's why modern social media people are called influencers, because regardless of their ideas, they are influential, for a handful of reasons. But I guess what I want to ask too is like a question I posed is, what is politics? And I said politics is power on the last podcast. And someone's comment was just, well, politics is in power, so there's that. Which is funny because there is that idea. And so I've tried to do a little bit more research on what politics is, what power is. Um and power is the ability to do something. So when I say politics is power, it comes from a place where people in the 20th century did ascribe the state as having omnipotent power. That the state could, in fact, do anything because it was not confined to any inability or any scarcity. There were no constraints on the state, was the belief. Obviously, in hindsight, we do live not in the Garden of Eden or of superabundance, but of relative abundance that we're continuing to increase in, and relative scarcity or scarcity. So we don't have an omnipotent state, nor an omniscient one. But I think this idea of power is attractive to people because it's both a means to obtain more power and social status, and an ends of kind of more feeling like one has, um I guess, like self-assurance or self-sovereignty. um but power is like a drug, and I think, uh you know there was, unfortunately, my point being, I'm gonna stop reading these comments. I can't reply to these comments because obviously the more I podcast, the more crazy the comments. There's gonna be more comments, probably even more crazy ones, and I think it'd be very wise of me to just disregard that, but focus on these ideas and my own personality, if you will. Um, and I guess where I see, obviously, what this podcast being named after, the thinking market, is just a way for me to think about this, of thinking about how people react to different ideas. There was a debate recently between Curtis Yarvin and Glenn Weil, and like after the opening remarks, Curtis was asked a question and he began responding, and someone in the front row was just like, "Mr. Mulbug, we do not need to be having this conversation." And immediately, like, respect to Glenn for being like, "Oh, stop, like, shut up and get out of here." And security had to escort, I don't know if it was one person or a couple people, but the idea was about democracy, and should, um you know our society consider alternative ideas for these political arrangements. And I think when it comes to democracy, people feel this like empowerment, uh but I think it is very potent and illusory, um like a drug, like pornography. I like the example that, you know, being in a democracy, you have the same amount of power, or as close to power as pornography is from having actual sex, which I think is a really useful analogy to understand, like, oh, as a citizen in ancient Greece, the term citizen meant high class slave. So, how much freedom do we actually have from the state? I mean, the freedoms we have in this country are being eroded on the daily, which sounds pessimistic, but I think it's not. I think it's just understanding that, like, you have a disease, it's spreading. This is the reality. This is not to tell you that, like, um, you getting skinnier from this disease, it means you're like looking great, and that you are healthy, when in fact you may not be. Um, so I guess it's just like in the diagnosis of what's going on in politics and society. If we can agree on, I guess, not only the diagnosis is, but yeah, essentially what the effects are and what the cause of these effects are, then obviously we're not even on the same page about so many things. Um, which is interesting. But as Confucius said, I think he said this: wisdom is calling things by their real name. So we need to just call a spade a spade. And I think the best way to do this is obviously through like studying etymology, but reading more and more and more and more. Um, because that's probably where the answers are. And as badly as I would like to be more confident, frankly, bold, uh, that maybe will only come in time, because right now I don't have all these answers. And I would like to just keep thinking about these things over and over till I feel more confident that I have some truth in understanding more about my concept of justice and politics and economics and my philosophy of life in the world and society and what it means to be free in a free and just society and what truth is. Until then, this is more of a mental exercise and an open monologue for discussion for other people to kind of tap in with me, and also for my future reflection of where I was and where I will be in the future when I probably eventually reflect on this and stuff like this. So I don't know if this was even a good podcast episode, but I just really wanted to pick up where I kind of left off in my thoughts about the last episode, about power, about politics, how things are unfolding, about psychologies and personalities. People believe what they believe, and that manifests in them. And when I think of someone like Ludwig von Mises, he did not go into like ad hominems, dropping names, and disparaging people on, you know, ad hominems, attacking like their reputation. Or it also wasn't like the logical fallacy of the appeal to experts. Well, this person is an expert. They have a couple letters in front of their name, like, or a degree. That doesn't mean they're more right. So I guess I would just like to develop that in myself, of being able to debate on ideas alone and understand that, yeah, my personality is probably what's like going to be, I don't know, the door to the ideas. It is people who carry ideas, and it's people who, I guess, make movements, set trends for really no greater reasons about the ideas themselves, but just that people are social beings and attracted to people and admire confidence. So yeah, I guess this is a lesson in confidence, really. It's just, if you are confident, you'll have a much more impactful personality, I guess. And that will be more infectious. And that's, I guess, what people are drawn to. So yeah. um but again, this comes back to economics, to tie everything back to economics, that perhaps it's these ideas that influence people's perspective on economics. If we think, no, 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 we have this confidence, we have this omnipotence, we have the capability to create a centrally planned, scientific, socialized society, then that's probably more likely to be implemented, as much as it will fail because you don't have prices. And when you don't have prices, you don't have means to allocate scarce resources. So you have shortages and surpluses. Moreover, it's this confidence, this audacity to think that we know how to make people happy from the central planner's perspective, or we know what's best for people, like the utilitarian perspective. And this combination, this recipe, has to negate people's freedom. Well, they'll call it freedom, saying, well, you should be free with what we design in society, so you have all these like conditions that are adequately met and stuff. But this system of forcing people into it negates their choice. And if you don't have a choice, then you're not necessarily free. So obviously, this is not the most in-depth and detailed analysis of the economics of central planning and socialism, but I just want to discuss how the personality, the psyche, kind of operates. um, this is what's been kind of on my mind. And I do stand by politics as power. Come on. Like, what else is, like, read The Machiavellians by James Burnham, and then tell me politics is not power. Uh, it just strips all these, what Burnham refers to, or it was one of the Machiavellians called, like, the political formula. This idea of, you know, there's a sun god, and in order to get the sun to rise, we have to make sacrifices. So this is like an example of a political formula. You can extrapolate this to many modern examples of political formulas, but it's an idea, and it's carried based on obviously faulty reasoning, faulty lack of common sense. There's a logic to it. If there's a sun god, and if the sun rises based on sacrifices, then we need to do some sacrificing, which is what has occurred historically. So history is littered with examples of political formulas and implementations of these ideas that have done more harm than net benefits for people's lives, people's material well-being. So I guess there is then a balance between like humility and confidence. Maybe confidence is not the right word. Maybe it's more of like an arrogance. But I guess, yeah, perhaps one can be confident and humble and be cautious of arrogance, of thinking you know, when in fact you don't know. Even myself today, I had a lesson in my own arrogance, where I did kind of ascribe, because I was talking to Thad like an hour ago in a Zoom about Karl Marx, and I did make the claim, like, wasn't Marx blah 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 blah, and he's like, no, don't do that, don't do the ad hominems, because, and I thanked him, because as intellectuals and as academics, like, to really be, you know, intellectually honest is to discuss ideas, not so much the personalities of people, but genuine ideas. At least that's what I would prefer. So yeah, I know this has probably also been a rambling, but I think it's okay to ramble as long as you have a personality that, well, anyone can ramble, I suppose, but I don't know. I'm gonna just stop looking at these comments because they're way too crazy. And yeah, I think it's interesting to be aware of your own personality. Maybe that will break some brains, but it's kind of fun to reflect. I think well, this is the question of like, what is enlightenment? Is it a hyper meta awareness, a metacognition, a meta psyche of choosing your personality? Well, and probably much more than that, but just food for thought and considerations. And with that, let's move on into another next episodes of some serious thinking market with you.